Welcome to The Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn, where purpose meets performance and leaders are built to shift legacies. I'm Dr. Sharalyn Payne, executive strategist, speaker, and the secret weapon behind leaders who drive transformation at the highest levels. Each episode delivers bold truths, power skills, and real-world strategies to help you lead with precision, show up with presence, and build the kind of influence that outlasts trends. This is the space where high-impact decisions are born, where influence is intentional, and where the bold don't just lead, they change the game. So if you're ready to rise, ready to lead, and ready to create the kind of impact that moves markets, missions, and minds, you're in the right place. Welcome, Game Changers, to another episode of The Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn. I have a fantastic and absolutely beautiful guest for you today. You should thank me because she's looking absolutely gorgeous. Dr. Robin Buckley, she's going to be here and she's going to share some information with us that's going to change how we see ourselves, how we think, and then also impact the most important relationship of our life. This is truly a game-changing episode. I'm going to encourage you to grab your paper, grab your beverage of choice. Hopefully it's non-alcoholic because you do not want to miss a word that she says. And your pen, and let's take some copious notes. Let's figure out how we can change our lives, how we can change our relationships, and how we can also impact and transform our careers. Dr. Robin, so happy to have you here today.
Dr. Sharalyn, thank you for having me. I'm excited for our talk.
Me too. When we had a conversation before, it was absolutely dynamic. You have me laughing, so my mouth is actually hurting right now. So thank you for that. I don't know how I'm going to get through this talk because my mouth is hurting.
You'll figure it out.
But I'm excited and I'm absolutely just, really optimistic for the conversation that you have for us today. I see that you have your books behind you that are looking absolutely gorgeous as well. And we're going to dive into that. But before we do, why don't you share with us who you are and how you help people through your business?
Who I am, that's a great question. I'm going to take a different spin than I usually do. If I was to pick one word that I hope people remember me by, it's kindness. I really live from that compass of being kind to strangers and family members and friends. And I'm not perfect by any means, but that is my guiding light. And so in my work, I have a PhD in clinical psychology and a certificate in executive coaching, and I use that to predominantly help executives and couples really determine what their guiding lights are in their careers and their relationships. So helping them make a strategic plan instead of just winging it and hoping things work out. So that's my big focus when it comes to my professional side.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So kindness, I say the same thing when people ask me what's the game changer for me. I truly believe it's being kind.
Yep.
And my mom just raised me. She would always say, it's nice to be nice. And, I think that nice is one thing, kind is different. And you can choose to be kind every single day, no matter what. So how did you arrive at that as your shining light?
I would go back to my parents too. They modeled it. They modeled kindness in so much of what they did. And it just, I didn't even think about it. It was what we did as a family and how I really hope I raised my kids to understand that that is so important and so valuable, especially with some of the strife that is out there today, that it just being kind. It doesn't mean you have to love someone, doesn't mean you have to,
Absolutely.
embrace everything that they believe, but just to be kind opens up so many doors in terms of listening and understanding and hopefully the development of respect. But kindness just becomes that really important kind of foundation, certainly for me and based on what my parents showed me.
Wow. I love that. As you were speaking, one of the things that I, went back and I was reflecting on was in my personal and career relationships. And just the ones that have had that break and why. And what I found is I live true to my values.
Right.
And my friends always say that you are a values driven person. Whatever your values are, you like uphold them and you're consistent with your values. But one that I'm thinking of in particular is just leaders who I've not necessarily had the strongest relationships with because they were the exact opposite of kind,
Right.
where it became
Right.
toxic. Or even in my personal relationships, those relationships that I've had to eventually cut was because the person was so
Right.
unkind. Maybe life happened. And instead of them leaning in another way, they just became hateful
Yeah,
individuals. And decided I don't want that in my life. And so
I
I
agree.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, that's a non-negotiable for me when and later on if it comes up related to the book, I talk to my clients about creating lists of negotiables and non-negotiables. For me, kindness is a non-negotiable. I would not be able to effectively be in any type of relationship, friendship or committed relationship with someone who is consistently unkind or unkind enough. I mean, it is, once in a while, I can understand how things might, if you're
Absolutely.
having a bad day, whatever, but they better be rare because essentially, even in your most difficult moments, if you truly aren't a kind person, it's going to demonstrate, tr any kind of stress brings out the best or the worst in people.
Absolutely.
And to be able to tap back into just some kindness is, yeah, that's something that I'm not willing to be flexible on.
And why is that?
Because I think it goes back to what we talked about, that it's so essential in my value system. And, in your work with leaders and my work with leaders, what I have found more and more is that leaders who are authentically being driven and guided by their true values, those are the ones that are effective. They may not be everybody's cup of tea. I mean, sometimes there's a misalignment in values. Doesn't mean one person's bad or good or any kind of judgment around that. But those people, those leaders that move forward, understanding what their values are and their behaviors reflect those values, are incredibly effective in their not only in the success of their business, but in leading others.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
Mm.
So you mentioned your book. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. I was going to save it for the end, but now you've given me that little snippet. I love a good story. So I'm like, still, who shot JR? I want to know the end.
Well, there's a reference. You shot JR. I love it.
Who shot JR? Exactly. I want to know what happened. I am tuned all the way in. I got to know.
You're gonna have to put in your notes for the millennials and the Gen Xers who that person
Right.
is.
Exactly. I'm giving my age away. They're like the new generation. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Friday nights at 7 p.m., glued to the
There
television.
you
Where
go.
is Sue Ellen when I need her? So, with that, let's talk about the book Marriage Inc. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, two things. From a professional side, it was particularly the female executives I worked with. They were such incredible leaders, and they could manage conflict at work, and they could, organize situations. They could come up with protocols, and then they would start talking about their personal relationships, and it's like everything went out the window. And I kept bringing them back to the idea. I'm like, well, what do you do at work when there's a conflict? No, 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 that's different, Robin. I'm like, why is it different? Use the same skills that you do so effectively in the workplace and generalize it to home. So the more I use that as a framework, this idea of looking at relationships from a business framework kind of coalesced in my mind. And I created a very clear process of how we can incorporate really strategic principles from business into our relationships to hopefully create the same type of success. Now, from the personal side, in all transparency and irony, I've been divorced twice. And of course, I didn't go into either of those marriages thinking, oh, this is temporary. I thought those were long-term relationships, but I did not have a plan. I had no plan. I organized and created two very different but lovely weddings down to the detail. But the marriages that followed, there was no plan, no structure, no protocols, no opportunity to enhance communication. And so between those two experiences, this idea made more and more sense to me about how to bring strategy into our relationships, not to diminish romance, but to protect it.
Wow, that's definitely a game changer. It's definitely a way to think about it. And I've shared very similar principles, not as strategic as you are in depth. So let me be clear with that. But I have had conversations with people and say, hey, what if we looked at our relationships, our marriage especially, and we entered into it with the idea that this is a business. And if we wanted our business to be successful,
Right.
what is it that we need to do? What are our values? What's our mission? What are our goals? Where are
Right.
we headed? What are we working on?
Right.
And so I would love for you to kind of give us some insight. And I'm pretty sure it's different, right? Because you've actually studied this. It's just me talking. Uh, and so it's not necessarily rooted in anything, just me running my mouth.
It's a
But
good
with
place to
that,
start.
can you give us some tools or tips or strategies or insights, wherever you want to go with this,
Sure.
on how we can actually structure our relationships to be more successful?
Yeah, you actually alluded to it just a second ago, Sharalyn, is that the idea of establishing a vision and mission statement, two different
Hmm.
statements that guide a couple. The vision is that overall, where do we want to get to and why do we want to get there? And the mission statement is more about how are we going to get there. So it takes the vision statement and breaks it into actionable behaviors, and it is focused very much on the couple, because a lot of couples will come to me with, they've created these statements and very often will incorporate, oh, and we want to teach this to our kids. And I'm like, and that is lovely. And now, and you have a family mission statement. What's your couple mission statement? Because you are the foundation of that family. So that is probably the very, I'm not sure I can't remember the last time I worked with a couple and that wasn't the place that we started, because it is so essential to create that really strong platform in order for them to implement the other strategies, for them to know where are we going and how are we going to get there. So that's the first one. And, it's fun to watch couples do that. Usually when there's some pushback because they're like, Robin, that's too rigid or it's too much like business. I'm like, okay, but why do businesses have vision and mission statements? And I don't care if you have a business background or not, people can tell me why it's essential for businesses, to provide the compass, to provide clarity, to unify the people within the organization. And of course, then I have to be obnoxious and turn it around on them and say, okay, so you don't want any of that in your relationship? You don't want unification? You don't want clarity? And then, of course, they laugh, hopefully, usually, because they're like, oh, I'm like, right. It can create the same outcomes, even though it's a relationship versus business.
Wow, I would agree. That's powerful. One of the things you shared though is the pushback. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so what if you are, and maybe it goes back to the partner that you select, especially if you're doing this prior to getting engaged and getting married, right? But what if you're the person who's the business person and then your partner is the exact opposite of that? And I say that I'm thinking about just some people that I know. I won't call their names, because they will be guilty. And so we want to protect those guilty individuals, but they know who they are if they're listening. But apart from that, even just I was listening to a podcast with Michelle Obama
Mm,
and her brother, and who was
it's a
on this
great one.
podcast? Yeah, who else was on there? Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union.
Oh,
And she was speaking about her sister and her dynamic, her family dynamic with her sister, and how they continuously butt heads. Right, I haven't
mhm,
finished the podcast, but also about her as well as him, and their styles are so different. So it seems
mhm,
like she's more, I would say, rigid, right, buttoned up, professional. Hey, this is it. How do we get here faster, quicker, more efficiently? And they're like, yeah, just kind of going along with the flow, and they're more, of course, more open to possibility, where she's like, no, let's eliminate all risk, right? And I
mhm,
can even see that with some of the people in my own life, that I can be a little bit more buttoned up, still
mhm,
like to have fun when
mhm,
it comes to certain things, because I want to ensure that it's successful, right? I'm investing my time, effort, energy, and resources. And not saying that they're not, because they are equal, some are equally successful in their own right. They're entrepreneurs as well, but they've never worked in corporate America. They've only worked for themselves
right.
in some cases, or they're in academia. So they're used to being in this little prison all day. Um, somebody telling them what to do and where you got
Mm,
to report it. Do not leave that classroom or do not leave
right.
this, right? So it's a totally different dynamic there. So, how do you encourage those individuals that have those different dynamics to get on board with this
Right.
vision that you mentioned?
Great question. And I get that from that pushback. I also get it from couples who one member really wants to work on the relationship, but the other one, I think, is coming from a place of fear. They don't want to do therapy, even though I explained to them it's not therapy, it's coaching, which is very different. And so we'll start with the first one that you mentioned, the two different styles, buttoned up versus laissez-faire. And what I usually suggest, first of all, I usually say, let's give it a try. Because are things working to the best place you both want to be? I mean, if they're talking with me, they're probably not. So, okay, so we know it's not working the way you're doing it. So let's give this 2 or 3 sessions just to see if even some small changes could be made in that short amount of time. And then from there, I talk to them very often about, you can have it both ways simultaneously. We can do the button-up report approach to get to more spontaneity and more fun. If the logistics of your relationship, if the things that run your daily life are taken care of, you know that that you have oversight of them, that they have their place, that you know when you're going to talk about certain things. If you know all that is already organized, then it allows not only mental space, but physical space to then just do things on a whim and be spontaneous and have fun and engage in physical intimacy because everything else is taken care of. So you're not picking one or the other, you're actually picking both because they support each other. The more that you're structured and organized, the more spontaneous you can be. And then when you have that spontaneity, it encourages the connection and encourages the bond, which then will enhance the way the logistics are going. So I wouldn't separate them out. I would hope that both occur and support each other in terms of how the structure and the spontaneity can move the relationship forward.
I love that. That's powerful. What you just reminded me of it. I have a friend who is going through a divorce,
Mhm.
and we're just friends. But well, actually, he's divorced now. But he wants me to be more spontaneous. And he's
Mhm.
always saying, well, hey, can we do this and can we do that? And I'm like, no, first of all, we're not dating. Let's be clear. And so I'm not
Good,
taking
good,
the
good, clear
place
parameters.
of your ex-wife. So let's be clear on that.
Mhm.
And no, I can't because there are some other things that I need to get done and that I have to get done with running a business, right? And so it requires me to have more structure, more things to do, and I have to balance, my own personal life now that you have an abundance of time that's
Right,
available. And I
right.
can see individuals, and even when I think about my friends who are in a relationship with people, and what I'm going to say a person, not necessarily people. I would guess it would just be one person, but they're in a relationship with one person. But what I hear them complain about is I have all of these things to do because I'm an entrepreneur. And I am dating someone who's
Mhm.
not an entrepreneur who works a 9 to 5 job. And they think that after 5 o'clock, it's game time and I can do anything and everything that I want, but I still have these other things to do. Plus, I'm a mother. So, how do I balance that? And
Right.
so I hear you saying that, and they've really been challenged in these relationships. And so they are of the mindset that I absolutely must have someone who's an entrepreneur who really
Yeah.
gets that. So what would you say to that person?
Yeah, those are great scenarios that when it comes to that, whether it's your friend in that scenario you talked about or the example you gave of the couple, it's understanding that you don't have to, the entrepreneurs don't have to be married to each other. And even if they are, I would argue that there are times when there's this flow to business that can, right now, my husband and I are both entrepreneurs in our own practices, and I am incredibly busy, 12-hour days minimum between promoting the book and doing the final things that have to happen right before the book. I am working a lot. And he's at a slower time right now. And so he's the one that he's comes in at 3 o'clock, like, how much more are you working? I'm like, I don't know, like 6 hours. I don't know. But what we've decided, what works is establishing very clear parameters around what does the workday look like. So in the past, I was very wishy-washy. He would come in and ask, and I'd be like, I don't know, maybe like a couple more hours, knowing I actually wanted to work for another 6, that it was important to me to work another 6, but I felt bad. Well, that created bigger problems for us because he would be ready in 2 hours and I'd be like, how about another hour? So once we had a very calm meeting, not in the moment, because that would have been very heated, but once we were able to calmly say, okay, how are we going to organize this? From my side, it was I am going to be honest and really estimate as accurately as possible how much time I'm actually going to give. And also be a little flexible that it's maybe not 6 hours at the end of every day that I'm working because that's not beneficial to our relationship. He, on the other hand, is going to be flexible knowing that if he has some free time, it doesn't mean I have free time, but we create the very clear SOPs, the standard operating procedures, so we are clear. Even simple businesses have hours of operation. So the
Right.
same can be true in this example with the work hours. What today is the work hours for me versus him? And so couples who are in these situations, one person might be coming home at 5 o'clock ready to relax, but if they've had a conversation, maybe reviewed the week together and said, okay, let me take a look at this week. So Monday through Wednesday, I am going to be working until at least 7:30, but I will absolutely cut off my hour at 8, regardless of whether I'm done. Then that other person knows. And they might offer, well, on Thursday and Friday, I would really like to be able to come home and spend time together. Okay, how can we make that happen? So it's being clear on what everything looks like and not trying to be, even though we talked about kindness, not trying to be nice to try and give too much that then it's you're giving up part of your professional self for your personal self. It can be both. And your friend that all of a sudden has all this time, that's great. But it's the conversation around, okay, I'd love to spend some time together. That'd be super fun. Pick a date in the future in 2 weeks. And I don't even know, you need to know what we're doing. But if you say 3 o'clock on this Saturday, I will block the rest of the day to do whatever you have planned. So that allows for his spontaneity of deciding how the time is used, but you're being very clear that it can't happen at the drop of a hat.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Great. You mentioned something earlier that I want to backtrack on. Couples therapy versus couples
Yeah.
counseling. Let's talk about that.
Okay,
What's
so
the
the
difference
difference, first of
between
all, so therapy and counseling are the same. Couples coaching is different.
coaching? Yes.
Yeah. So the easiest way for me to explain the difference that I think most people can grasp onto instead of going into long theoretical conversations is couples therapy, first of all, is going to address clinical issues. So when I work with a couple, I screen them for some very specific clinical issues. One, if there's any kind of recent or current addiction, recent or current abuse, recent or current adultery, recent or current loss. Those are the things that I want to make sure are not in place because if they are, therapy is 100% the place to start because those are clinical issues. Those are creating a problem. I also do ask them about any current mental health issues. So if they're going through significant depression or anxiety, they're not getting help for that. Those would be also where I'd tease out how significant is it and should therapy be in place first. So clinical issues, clear sign of therapy. The other thing about therapy is very often, very typically, therapy has a present past focus. They do a deep dive into the past in order to make changes in the present. Okay. Coaching is different. First of all, no clinical issues. Most people who come into coaching are much, as you know, are much more motivated. They want to be there. They want to make changes. And I love that. That's just fun to work with. But coaching is also about where are you now and where do you want to get to in the future? So it's a present future perspective. For the couples I work with, it's what's going on. It's not we're going to, do a deep dive that 2 years ago you did this thing. I can't change the past for couples. They can't change the past for themselves, but we can change what's going on right now. And we certainly can make a plan for changes that they want for their future.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk about is you have a proprietary coaching model.
Mhm.
Are you able to give us some insight into that?
Yeah, it's all in the book. It's
Yeah, let's
all
talk about the
it's
book.
all about looking at relationships from a business framework. And when I started writing the book, I hadn't met or heard anybody else looking at couples from this perspective. Now, since I've been writing the book and since it's coming out, or well, by the time this podcast comes out, it will have come out, that there are people out there who are starting to look from a strategic way at relationships. And I'm really excited about that. I had a dear colleague who said, "Oh my gosh, are you afraid because some other people are?" I'm like, "No, it means more people are talking about it. It means that it's going to gain credibility, and that's terrific." And then, as you know, Sharalyn, some people who want to work with me aren't going to want to work with a different coach, and vice versa. So great. Other people are using the same framework, but using their own style.
Right.
So this idea of relationships being within this business model, existing within this business model is something that I've been doing for probably almost 15 years now, and slowly adding to it. And it's really exciting because the more I do it, the more I pull in new ideas. So when there's a marriage incorporated too, there'll be more stuff that we can use for relationships.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. We're looking forward to the book coming out. When does it come out, by the way?
So it comes out September 18th. So depending on your audience, it might be already out and available on Amazon. So
It will.
yeah, it took me 7 years to write, which I guess is relatively typical for a book. And some of the slow parts were some really challenging at things that came up, like my mom passing. So of course it slowed down the process. So to get to the point where now I get to put this out to the world, and just maybe someone's strolling, Barnes and Noble or scrolling on Amazon and they find it and it even gives them one idea, one strategy. That to me, that actually is an act of kindness.
Perfect. Now, how did you come up with that idea for the book?
Yeah, that goes back to the work that I was doing with my executives and just how over and over they kept explaining how they could manage such similar situations at work and they did not see that it was the same at home. So I've worked with couples around this, but I've actually also worked with executives who use some of these strategies with their kids and how to communicate and talk with their kids. And not that your child is your peer by any stretch of the imagination. And my oldest is 31, so I still don't consider him a peer. But how I can use some of the things that I use in my business life to talk with my kids, to organize conversations. I have worked really hard as they've gotten older, for example, not to blindside them. I think that's a mistake a lot of parents made, that it's like, oh, yeah, this thing, or oh, we got to talk about this. And we would never do that to a colleague. We'd say, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes, maybe in an hour or tomorrow, that we can sit down and talk about that?" And it's not just about respect, it's about making sure that that person is in the mindset, has mentally prepared themselves for a conversation where they might be getting feedback, or at least there's going to be a dialogue. So the strategies in the book, while the title sounds like it's just for married people, I see this as for anyone, including people who are dating or not even dating or just not currently in a relationship, but think maybe someday I will be. How do I make a plan for that before I'm even in it?
Perfect. Thank you. Now, I see there's a book. Is there a workbook as well?
There is,
Can you
yeah.
share that with us? Can we see
Yeah, absolutely.
it?
So this is the workbook.
Okay.
And what it does is, so much of the book is practical. It's very tangible actions that a couple can do or a person can do on their own. And so that it gave them some structure, I created activities, essentially worksheets that I've been using with my clients for years. And while people can go into the book and download it, they can actually go onto my website and with a code, they can download these worksheets. But if you're like me, I really like to hold on to something. I like everything
Me
to be
too.
organized in one space. So for the people in the world who are like me, I made the workbook so that it became this dynamic tool for them to integrate as they're reading the book, hopefully together.
Perfect. Thank you. So they can do the workbook together.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I, I, I really think my belief is that it is important to have both people equally interested in being engaged. And I say it carefully like that because I have worked with couples where there wasn't, it's not going to be exactly the same level of engagement. And I don't think that's a flaw unless one person is completely checked out and the other person's driving everything. That would be something I would address with a couple. But it allows them to actually have a hands-on approach to their relationship. Again, theory is lovely, inspiration is terrific, but if you don't walk out from a couples coaching session with things you could actually implement, then it's not going to give you the results you want. You and I both know any leader, if we were just sitting in our coaching sessions with them and just talking theory and philosophy, they'd be like, all right, look, time. It's valuable. I got to see some results for all this ROI. And it's
Exactly.
for couples. So the workbook helps get them closer to that return on investment that they're making.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've helped us with our
Mhm.
relationships. Now I want to spin,
Okay.
I want to pivot a little bit. Let's talk
Yeah.
about us. I want to get personal with you because of something you shared at the very beginning,
Hmm.
and that was that you had been divorced twice.
Hmm.
How did that impact your work or even your I'm going to say your how do I want to say this? How you feel about yourself, how you felt about yourself at the time. Was there any inner work that you
Mm,
needed to do? Did imposter syndrome show up as you're writing a book or you're
that's
coaching
a
other
great
people in
question.
relationships? And so let's talk about that.
Sharalyn, I have never been asked this, and I love that. All right, so how did it impact me? So my first divorce, I'd only been married for 8 months. I say too young. I mean, I just had graduated college when I got engaged. And just as simple as I could say it, I didn't know myself. I was a young 20-year-old woman. I don't think there is most young 20-year-old women who really know what they're going to want in 20 years when they're in their 40s. We just haven't had the life experience. I
Right.
don't care. I'm sure there are women that are exception to the rule, but not the majority. So that was really my downfall. I did not know myself well enough. And there were control issues that also did not work very well for me. So that's why that relationship ended. But no one in my family, including my extended family, had ever been divorced. No one. And I have
Wow.
a boatload of cousins. So there was this feeling of being the black sheep of the family that I imposed on myself. Nobody ever directly said that to me, but I felt it because that's how I saw myself. My second marriage, I, in some ways, it didn't happen immediately after that divorce, but it came within a couple years. And that my second husband was fun and charming and definitely not controlling. So he brought in a lot of the things I'd been missing in my first marriage. And he was and still is a good guy, just not the right guy for me. We had a totally different level of drive, which I think was very challenging for both of us, and a different idea of what fun actually meant in term and how that balanced in just managing day-to-day logistics. And for him, it could have always been fun. And I'm like, but yeah, but there's other things that need to get done. And then once we
Right.
had our first child, that really became so apparent. So with those two, there was just that feeling of what am I doing? Why do I keep making these choices? But I will tell you that I did manage to get past it relatively quickly because I do know what I want in life. At that point, I did. And so now we're hitting like mid 30s. I was like, no, I have a clearer sense. I know what I wanted for my two daughters at the time, who's their dad's my second husband. And I wanted to offer them a different perspective. And one person that was my strongest advocate was my mom. And she would introduce me to people. She'd be like, this is my daughter Robin. She's a doctor. She, does psychology, and she's been divorced twice. And I used to say to her, Mom, you do not need to lead the conversations with this. She's like, but I'm proud of you. You didn't stay. You didn't stay when it wasn't right for you, and you didn't stay when you weren't happy. And you had the education and the career so that you could walk away when it was no longer working for you or your girls. She's like, I'm proud of you. And so after a while, I stopped correcting her because I'm like, she's coming from a place of pride in my choices, which I'm not sure. Well, I know not everybody would have, not every parent would be proud of that in their daughter. So it was a cool shift. It aligned with when my brain was shifting around my choices and my divorces, and hearing her more and more just say, "No, I'm proud of you," was it still means a lot to me, even if she's not still here. I just it yeah, it was nice. It's nice to know that that was something that she saw as a strength in me. So writing the book, getting back to that, it's when people, and I've had a couple of people challenge me, why should we listen to you? Like, you've been divorced twice. And I remind them that, some of the best, the most well-known, pillars of business industry had failures. They had startups that didn't work out. They had projects that didn't go well, and they learned from those lessons. And those are the people that we take a lot of value and listen to, whether it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or, so many female leaders that I love to listen to. I love learning from their oversights or their lessons, their mistakes, because maybe it'll help me avoid it. So if I can help people avoid making similar mistakes, maybe they'll make their own mistakes, that's inevitable. But if I can help them avoid some of the ones I did, that's awesome.
I love that you shared that story, Dr. Robin.
Mm.
It was so powerful. I was fighting back tears. So thank you for taking a little bit longer, because I
Yes,
didn't
thank
have to go
you.
into the ugly cry. But your mom, man, that is
She's amazing.
absolutely amazing how she affirmed you.
Yeah, she
And I
was.
think that's powerful
Mhm.
because while you saw it as, I'm wearing this scarlet letter A or scarlet letter D,
Right.
right? Your mom is like, no, my daughter is bold and she's brilliant and
Yeah.
she's courageous and
Yeah.
she's taking ownership of her life and she's not allowing things to happen to her. She's not a victim. She's getting out here. Like I can go on and on
Yeah. It was a
about what
lot.
I was hearing when you shared that story, and it was so powerful. And I'll share with you the reason why I asked this question is even not too long ago, I was having a conversation on a podcast, and someone asked me about President Trump. And I
Mhm.
normally, don't share my,
Right.
values or vision as, as it relates to politics for any particular politician,
Mhm.
right? Just because of the world that we live in. And so I just will rather keep the peace regardless of
Mhm.
whoever it is. It doesn't matter whatever the president is. And I shared with them, they said, well, President Trump is a narcissist because he's been married 3 times. And I was like, are you serious? Like that's your like you've got to be you got to have more weight than that. And they're like, no. And I said, look, here's my viewpoint on that. I know a lot of people who've been married multiple times. I truly believe in my heart, you have the right to try again and find
Mhm.
love.
Agreed.
No one gets to say that because of whatever reason we weren't in that relationship. We have
Yeah.
no idea what happened. You can assume because you see him, little clips of him that you know who he is. You don't know him at heart and at core of
Yeah.
who he is versus a persona that maybe he's projecting or putting out there or what this machine has created. He's been on
Right.
television. You're like all of these things that you
Yeah.
assume you deeply know this person, you don't. But even if you did, and even if what you said was true, we deserve to have love in our lives. And if this is not working, to be
Mhm.
bold and courageous and say, hey, this vision that I had, it's no longer
Right.
working. It no longer serves me.
Right.
And have the courage and the power to get out. I said, because the people who don't are living a lie.
Yeah.
There are going to be some ups and some downs in every single relationship of our life friendship, children, parents, whatever. It doesn't matter, right?
Mhm.
We know that's going to happen. But when you know that you're being disrespected and tolerated,
Mhm.
and your light is being blown out day in, day out for years, and this isn't a phase, this has now become a lifestyle,
Right.
then who is the narcissist? Is it you? Because you're deciding that, hey, you deserve to be in this and you want to stay in this, and you're
Right.
so important, whatever the values or whatever people have. I said, and I'm not knocking your religion, if that's your religious beliefs or that's your family, right? But it takes courage to say, this is
Agreed.
no longer working. And it
Yeah.
takes courage to say, I'm going to give it another shot. So, when it hasn't.
You used a word a second ago that I really liked, and that idea, being disrespected. And if I remember right, you were using it in terms of the other person doing it. But for for people who stay in unhappy relationships, and I think a lot of people have a lot of different reasons that they do so. but it's asking yourself, does this relationship, in being in this relationship, am I respecting myself?
Exactly.
Because if you're staying in a relationship because you don't want to get divorced for your kids, then you are respecting yourself. You're saying, okay, I'm putting my role as a parent higher than my role as a spouse. And that's respect. That's making a
Absolutely.
conscious choice. But asking that question, not from the am I being respected by my partner, but am I respecting myself by staying? And that can change over time. My sister's a great example. She stayed in her marriage for 25 years until she finally was like, nope, I am not respecting myself anymore. I was in the past. I made choices for specific reasons, but now it's a different vision of who I am and what I want. So my mom would be proud of her too. But yeah, I think it is interesting that someone on social media actually we had a dialogue, respectful dialogue about judgment and the idea of whether judgment has a place in love. And we had
Hmm.
opposing ideas, but my perspective was judgment does not have a place in love. That opinion does. Sure, you can have your opinion, but once we judge, it is saying right and wrong. You're right, I'm wrong, or vice versa. And once you do that, it's coming from a very strong place, in my opinion, of arrogance. Like I'm able to judge you. And so your example of the American president is a good one, that we don't have to like him or agree with him, or we can like him and agree with him, but judging is not valuable in
Right.
almost, I mean, unless it's a credible court of law, there's really no reason for judgment or reason that judgment will work. Opinion, sure, have your opinion and share it hopefully in a respectful way, but I just don't see judgment having that place.
Right. I would agree with that. I think what you just shared was so impactful when I think about the powerful women in the workplace
Mm,
and how they show up sometimes, or men as well, right? And the others who are neither man or woman,
mhm.
so I want to make sure,
That's it.
we're being inclusive.
Appreciate that.
But with that, a lot of times what I've seen is when we begin to have those deep conversations, there's something internally that's going on, a
Mhm.
failure or a break in a relationship. Maybe it's taking care of a sick parent or,
Right.
dealing with some type of sickness themselves or not getting over, a bad decision or, where they know they should do something different, but they don't have the courage and the power to do that. And I share one of my personal stories with them and just kind of give them hope that, going back to what you shared, I got an annulment on Valentine's Day and people judge me. They're like, Valentine's Day, you are cutthroat.
Oh,
And I'm like, yes, I got an annulment after 5 years of marriage, walked into the courtroom on Valentine's Day and defended myself because I refused to pay one penny to get out
mhm.
of that, but knew that, hey, I probably have a viable case. And I talked to a number of attorneys before then. It was just ridiculous, what they wanted to charge to exit that relationship with the idea that more than likely it's not going to happen. And
Right.
so with that, it became, I need to own my life. This is the only day
100%.
they have available. When I call or they call me and say, hey, we got Valentine's Day, February 14th. Do you have any other day? Yes, we have a day in April. The next court date we have in
Oh,
April.
no,
Nope.
no.
He
Yeah.
has to go today.
Yeah.
Therefore, I will take February the 14th
Yeah.
because of the self-respect and the love that I have for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're celebrating it, but just for yourself. And let's be very honest. And I say this to clients a lot when it comes to relationships. Disney, Hallmark, rom-coms, they created some of this importance around certain dates or the way a marriage is supposed to be and the way you fall in love. Like, come on, that's not reality. February 14th or not. And that, yeah. So no, good for you. You loved yourself enough on
I
that.
love myself.
Mhm.
Exactly. I decided that it was going to be a day of self-love and
Love it. I
self-respect. So
love
I
that.
like that you said that because that was the deciding factor as we had a conversation. And in that conversation, something he shared with me made me question, say, do you love, respect, and honor yourself?
Yeah,
And when
exactly.
I said, I think I do, well, you're not showing it with the
Right.
behaviors that you're tolerating.
Right.
Would you
Oh, you nailed
stay
it.
in a
Yes.
company that
Yeah.
did this to you? No, you
Yeah.
would not stay in a company. So why are you staying here?
100%. Oh, I love how
And
you
so,
shared that. Yes.
Thank you. And so that's what, led it for me. But it was some inner work that I needed to do
Yeah, I get
after
that.
that, because of course, like you said, you have these family and friends and people who are judging you, and then you're putting this label on yourself. So I love that you share that as a game changer for me. Before we wrap,
Yeah,
could talk to you all day, but before we
me
wrap, I
too.
want to ask you, what's the one thing you will leave with our audience today?
If I could whittle everything down, and whether it's relationships or career, it's two words: intention and prevention. Do
Hmm.
everything around with intent. Make it plans, create the details so that you do get to your end goal. And yes, the spontaneity will happen in the cracks. And then prevention, when you are approaching things with intent, you are better able to foresee issues that would become a problem, get in the way, hinder your progress. Because we darn well would not wait until our leg was black and we couldn't stand on it to go see a doctor. But a lot of people approach crises in their relationships or their careers from that perspective. I'll just wait and see what happens. Why would you do that?
Right.
I'm at it from a preventative nature so that it's easier to correct. It doesn't take as long, it's not as hard. So those would be the two things I would say focus on.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've been a complete joy today. It's been a
Just so
blessing for me. I know it's a blessing for the audience. Tell us where to find you.
absolutely. So easiest is my website, Dr. Robin Buckley, all one word. And God help me, Dr. Sharalyn. I am also on 8 social media platforms because my
Oh my
book coach said I should get myself out there. So the
gosh.
easiest ones, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can also find me under the same moniker.
Perfect. And we will have that information available for our listeners. Thank you so much. Hope to have you back and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Sharalyn.
You don't lead like everyone else, so your resources shouldn't look like everyone else's. I created the Game Changer Leadership Collection for high impact leaders like you, visionaries, change agents, decision makers who lead with intention and influence. This free high impact resource pulls from my leadership arsenal and delivers immediate actionable insights you can use right now to elevate your influence, lead with conviction, and drive lasting transformation. It's not just a toolkit, it's your first step toward leading at the level you were born for. Let me show you what's inside. The Leadership Edge Sampler. It's a preview of my 10 daily power skills to sharpen your influence and impact. The Influence Language Mini Guide. Essential phrases to increase your authority and build trust in every room you walk into. The Leadership Blind Spot Snapshot. Because the greatest risk are the ones we don't see. The power of one visual aid. A reminder that even one decision, one tone, or one conversation can shift a team or stall a movement. The Executive Briefing Checklist, a go to tool for high stakes communication that drives clarity and alignment. The 5 minute accountability brief, a no fluff framework to build a culture of ownership fast. And we have the Game Changer Ascension Model Overview, my proprietary leadership growth map to help you scale your influence with intention. These are the very same tools I use with executives, culture shapers, and elite teams, leaders who know what's at stake and aren't here to play small. Because when you're called to shift systems, influence nations, and build legacies, you can't afford to lead on autopilot. This is where your next level begins. Download the Game Changer Leadership Collection today. It's free, it's strategic, and it's built for leaders who are born to shift the game. I'm Dr. Sharalyn Payne, and this is your Leadership Edge. Thank you for joining me on the Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn, where we don't follow trends, we set them, and we don't just lead teams, we shift legacies. If today's message challenged, stretched, or inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, tag it, lead through it. Because real leaders don't just consume wisdom, they multiply it. Want to go deeper? Subscribe to the Ultra Influential newsletter for exclusive tools, behind the scenes strategy, and weekly mindset shifts for the leader ready to move nations, markets, and minds. Visit www.smpistrategies.com or send a note to leadership@smpistrategies.com. And if you're ready for next level coaching or consulting that positions you as the right leader at the right time in the right place, let's talk. This is what we do, and we do it with precision, power, and purpose. Remember, change isn't just something you lead, it's something you become. Stay bold, stay brilliant, stay a game changer.